Hello and welcome back to today's episode of TSARP. I'm your host, Andrew Weir, and today is a very special episode because we have a very special guest. It's Guy Kawasaki, host of the Remarkable People podcast. He's also the former chief evangelist at Apple, now the current chief evangelist at Canva, and author of his new book, Think Remarkable. So, Guy, you've done a lot over the years, so how about I turn over to you if you want to introduce yourself a little more, because I definitely didn't talk about it all.
It's not that I've done a lot. It's that I'm very old. So over the course of 70 years, I've done I've done a few things. So yes, you mentioned I used to be the chief evangelist of Apple, and now I'm the chief evangelist of Canva. When I was at Apple, I've worked there twice. My job was to convince people to write Mac software and create Mac hardware. And I left and I came back, and I was his chief evangelist at a time when Apple was supposed to die, and I helped prevent its death. I've been a startup entrepreneur. I've been a Mercedes-Benz brand ambassador, Wikipedia board of trustee. So I've started companies, I've run companies, I've done a lot of things that now I'm 70 years old, and I'm focused on writing and speaking and podcasting. My podcast is called Remarkable People, and it's about 5 years old. And so the genesis of my book, Think Remarkable, is the podcast, because we figured out that we have so much information and inspiration, but 250 hours and 5,000 pages of transcripts is not exactly in a easily digestible form. So we made it into a shorter book.
Yeah, and for a lot of our young teen entrepreneurs who might not know what evangelism is, do you want to explain it a little bit?
Sure. Evangelism.
I think we might have cut out for a second.
Oh, did I just screw up?
Yeah, you just cut out for a second, but it's fine. Very good.
I can continue?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So evangelism comes from a Greek word meaning bring the good news. And so what an evangelist does is bring the good news. And, there was this guy named Jesus Christ, and he brought the good news of eternal life. And Guy Kawasaki was evangelizing Macintosh as good news, that it would make people more creative and productive. And now I'm evangelizing Canva, because Canva makes people into better communicators, because it enables them to create beautiful graphic designs. So what an evangelist does is to get people to believe in his or her dream as much as he or she does. And it's always about not just what's good for you, but also what's good for the other person, the customer.
Yeah, and what got you into marketing and evangelism in the first place?
Wow. I mean, in a sense, I just fell into it. I wasn't an engineer, so I couldn't, design hardware or software. So, what else is left? So you're either making stuff or selling stuff.
And where was your first professional job in that space?
Well, it depends on how you define professional, but to give you a bit of my checkered career, I graduated from Stanford, and I went to UC Davis Law School, and I lasted 2 weeks before I quit. So I went back to Hawaii, where I'm from, and I worked for the Lieutenant Governor's office. And then the following year, I got an MBA, or started an MBA at UCLA. And while there, I started working part-time for a jewelry manufacturing company that I went to after I graduated. All my friends were going to management consulting firms and banks, and I went to a jewelry manufacturer. Fast forward a few years, and I got a job for a small software company. And then from that, I went to Apple as a second software evangelist. So my path has been not exactly a straight line.
Yeah, and what were some examples of how you really got developers to start making software for the Mac?
Well, back then, there was no software for Macintosh. So there were some developers like Microsoft, Lotus, and Ashton Tate that, they were kind of the VIPs, and they were dealing with all the big execs. And I'm not counting myself as a big exec. And I work for the relatively unknown and young companies that became very successful. For Aldus, for example, Aldus created a product called PageMaker, and PageMaker created desktop publishing, and desktop publishing arguably saved Apple. So my job was to let 100 flowers blossom and work with all these small shops that some of them grew into not just flowers, but actually oak trees.
Gotcha. And what was your favorite part about working at Apple? Why did you like doing it?
Well, we were drinking the Kool-Aid, and we definitely thought that we were changing the world, and we're bringing out a computer that had a completely different user interface that would enable more people to use computers. It was, we were on a mission from, Steve Jobs.
Yeah, and then what made you decide to leave Apple?
Well, what made me decide to leave Apple, I'm sure that many of your entrepreneur listeners can relate to, is that I wanted to start my own company. So I basically believe my own hype about how there were great opportunities in Macintosh. So I left the company to start a Macintosh software company.
What did that company do?
It made a Macintosh relational database called Fourth Dimension. So yeah, it was a high-end relational database.
Gotcha. And what did you like about working there, like more than working at Apple?
Well, I listen. It's not that easy a dichotomy. People think that you're either happy in a big company or happy in a startup, but there's pluses and minuses for both. And the small company, obviously, there weren't layers of management and stuff. But on the other hand, a small company, you're kind of living at the bleeding edge of financial capability, and you have no brand, and you don't have an infrastructure. So I mean, there's just different kinds of challenges, but an entrepreneurial mindset is definitely different than working for a Fortune 500 company mindset.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, big differences there, so I can see that. And then where did you go from there?
Well, after I left Apple, I started some companies, and then I came back to Apple as Apple's chief evangelist. Then I left again to start another company. And then I was living fat, dumb, and happy as a writer and a speaker. And one day, Canva reached out to me because they saw that I was using Canva on Twitter, and so they reached out to me, and we kind of fell in love, and I became the chief evangelist, and I've been their chief evangelist for 10 years now.
Yeah, I mean, I could go on and on about my love for Canva, but all of our thumbnails on YouTube have all been designed on Canva. The background for the live stream that everyone's watching right now, all in Canva. Our logo, I think, too. So all of our stuff, we use Canva at school, too. Our school has a Canva, and we use that for presentations and all different stuff. So I love Canva, but how did you first find it before you were the chief evangelist, and how did you find it to use on Twitter?
To tell you the story, that they found me. So I was working with a woman named Peg Fitzpatrick. She was doing my social media, and back then, this is 10 years ago, we had a theory that every tweet should have a graphic or a video with it. So she was using Canva to make Twitter graphics. And so we're doing this, and then out of the blue one day, Canva reached out to me as a direct message on Twitter and saying, we see that you, or an at mention, not a direct message. We're seeing that you're using Canva. We'd love to talk to you about, seeing what we could do together. And so I wasn't, completely certain about Canva. So I went to Peg and I said, Peg, is this the company we use? And she said, yes. And I said, do you like them? And she said, yes. Should I help them? And she said, yes. And I said, okay. And that's how Canva and I got together.
Gotcha. And after that, did you start using Canva like on your own too? Like without...
she continued to use Canva for me, making my graphics. I have used Canva from time to time. But now I've been speaking more and more, and many of these speeches are virtual. So I need a custom presentation for each one. So I make dozens of Canva 16:9 presentations that I use. So I use Canva quite a bit now, and 99% of the time it's to make 16 by 9 presentations.
And what's your like day to day as the chief evangelist at Canva?
Well, my day to day as a chief evangelist of Canva, because it's 10 years into it, is like pretty low key and easy, because Canva has about 175 million active users. So the days of trying to get someone to try Canva who's never heard of Canva are over. And now I am primarily just kind of a visible person. I do speeches for them and I do that kind of stuff for them, but it's not like I'm in the trenches for them anymore. It's kind of a glorious, kind of a glorious living that once you achieve critical mass. And then now we have added artificial intelligence to it, and we're trying to basically create all kinds of graphics, every kind of conceivable kind of graphic you would need. It's not a startup anymore. This is a real, solid company now.
Yeah, and speaking of AI, I love your opinions on AI and how you use it. So do you want to go into that a little bit?
Oh, sure. So there is no bigger believer in AI than me. Now, Canva uses generational AI to, if you want someone standing by the side of a river or, waiting for a duck or something like that. But my primary use of AI is for writing. And so I use AI as a writing assistant / research assistant that is available 24 by 7 by 365, infinite patience, no judgment, and kind of omniscient and omnipotent. So that's my research assistant. I also use it for editing to help me fine tune my writing. And I like it so much that I created Kawasaki GPT, and the data set of that is my writing, my speaking, my videos, and the transcripts from my podcast. So you can go to kawasakigpt.com and ask me a question, and I swear to God that Kawasaki GPT is better at being me than me. In fact, I go there and ask myself questions.
Yeah, I actually went to Kawasaki GPT today to see, if I could get any interview questions to ask you, because I thought that would be a great thing to bring up. And yeah, it came up with a few great ones. It said at the end, and I'll do this too, that, like how you and your podcast say, is there a question you wish I asked you, right, to your guest, that I should ask that to you or something similar? So it came up with some stuff like that. So yeah, I like it a lot.
And the beauty of Kawasaki GPT, like lots of people are creating GPTs based on their own writing, right? But if you do that right, you would limit. So if you go to somebody else's, Joe Blow GPT, and you ask Joe Blow a question about astrophysics, and he's not an astrophysicist, it should say that the scope of my knowledge doesn't cover this. So I believe that's the right thing to say rather than make shit up. But with me, because there's 250 transcripts in there, you're asking not only Guy, but you're asking Jane Goodall and Angela Duckworth and Carol Dweck and Stacey Abrams and Margaret Atwood. So because they are in my data set, they're in a sense inside Kawasaki GPT. So you're getting more than just my expertise.
Gotcha. And talking about your podcast a little, let's go back to that. What made you start podcasting?
Well, I started podcasting for two reasons. One is that I was on an author tour, and I asked these podcasters who were interviewing me what their model was. And when they told me what their model was, my only conclusion was, why am I a writer? I should be a podcaster. So that's half the story. The other half of the story is I kind of believe I have a moral obligation, because I'm fortunate to have the access to people like Jane Goodall. And I also have 40 years of frontline experience. So I know what kind of questions to ask. So I think, when you have those kind of two just strokes of luck, that you should take advantage of that luck and do something with it to get their knowledge into the general population.
Yeah, and how do you get like some of those guests on your podcast that you don't already know?
Well, it becomes easier and easier, and it starts with the fact that Jane Goodall was my first guest. So when you have Jane Goodall as your first guest, your second guest is easy because no guest in their right mind would say, "Oh, I don't want to go on this podcast. He doesn't have that famous and great guest."
Hmm.
Because Jane Goodall, I started at the top of the pyramid, right? And then the other thing is that, once you start getting guests, it becomes a self-fulfilling upward spiral. And now, whenever authors want to release a book, they're asking to be on the podcast. And we turn down about 10 people a day who want to be on the podcast. It's harder to be on my podcast than to get into Stanford or Harvard.
Yeah, that's great. I've obviously experienced that too. Like, you just got to first get your first few guests and then
Yeah.
try to get the more. And obviously, like you said, when you start with someone like Jane Goodall, it probably just keeps on going with more guests.
Yeah.
So, all right, so jumping back to AI a little bit, what's your view on people that say AI is too dangerous and is more bad than good?
I think that they are in denial. I think that, you know, I think they're massively overstating the dangers of AI. Yes, AI, it can make shit up, but if you spend 6 hours trying to convince AI to tell you something stupid and you do it, I mean, well, whose fault is that? I mean, is it AI or is it you? And so that's number one. Number two is, you can read all these things about the fears and everything, but this horse is out of the barn already. You're not putting this horse back in the barn, so you better get with it. And the third thing I think is that many comparisons where they're saying AI is dangerous, they're comparing the worst case of AI because it can be dangerous. Any technology can be dangerous. Every technology can be dangerous. So they're comparing the worst case of AI against the best case of human behavior. And that is a very unfair comparison. I mean, tell me you're comparing the worst of AI against the worst of humans or the best of AI against the best of humans. But don't tell me you're comparing the worst of AI against the best of humans. So I'll give you a very tangible question here. It's a multiple choice question. Let's take it as a given that there are nuclear weapons in the world. So somehow these nuclear weapons are going to be launched. Now, this is the multiple choice test. Who would you rather have the ability to launch nuclear weapons? Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un, or ChatGPT? I got to tell you something. I would pick ChatGPT. So now, what I'm trying to say is, if you're going to say that ChatGPT could start a nuclear war, that's like saying, oh, but humans would never. Humans are not going to start a nuclear war. They're not stupid. Well, I can tell you something. I am more worried about some of those people launching a nuclear weapon than I am of ChatGPT launching a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, and I love the points you brought up. I've talked to people about this before that, have, opposing AI viewpoints, saying AI is too bad. And I bring up a lot of things that you said, but you added to that. So I love that. And do you
I'll give you one more if you want.
Sure.
Okay, so you go to ChatGPT and you ask ChatGPT, should we teach the history of Black slavery in America? And you read what ChatGPT says. Now, you take that answer and then you get on an airplane and you go to Tallahassee, Florida, and you go to your favorite Florida politician and you say, should we teach the history of slavery in America? And you ask that. If you can get to the governor, ask Ron DeSantis, should we teach the history of slavery in America? And you compare his answer to ChatGPT's answer. And I guarantee you that you were going to say ChatGPT answered it better than he did.
Yeah. All right. And do you think we could possibly be in an AI bubble right now?
Well, if it's an AI bubble, it's the mother of all bubbles, because I'll tell you, I've been in bubbles. I've been in the .com bubble, for example. And I'll tell you what's the difference. The difference is that day to day, you and me, average people, we can use AI, right? It's not because we're going to sell pet food online, or it's not because we have some crazy ass .com idea that, we're going to make Amazon for Italian cars or something like that. But you and I, day to day, we can use AI to improve our lives. Me as a writer, you as a podcaster. I mean, if you own a restaurant and you're thinking, wow, what does AI mean to me? I would tell you, listen, you are you probably want to respond to Yelp reviews better. So go to ChatGPT and put in the comment from Yelp and say, draft me a response that thanks him for the for the comment and respond with some positive and suggestions and all that. And ChatGPT will 6 seconds will spit out this great answer that every restaurant owner could use. And that was not true in .com days. In .com days, it was like you got to kind of fantasize about people using .com. So maybe I'm just in denial, or maybe I just too much of a believer. But I think that AI is a bigger deal than the Industrial Revolution.
Well, I mean, I love that too. And you're right. I mean, I wasn't around in the .com bubble, but I love to hear your opinion because, like you said, you've been through a few different bubbles. So, let's finish off this interview talking more about your book. So, what I love about your book is it's not just like all your story and your ideas, but like you said, it's based off your podcast with everyone you've interviewed.
Yeah. This is not Guy's biography or Guy's autobiography, or the gospel according to Guy. Guy is merely a conduit and an editor to the wisdom and inspiration of very remarkable people. So my value add is getting that wisdom out onto the page. It's not coming up with the wisdom. And so, just like with Kawasaki GPT or my book, you are tapping into hundreds of people, not just me.
Yeah, and how did you get all the information from your podcasts into one book?
Well, I, first of all, I did not get all the information.
Yeah.
I mean, that would not have been possible in 170 pages. I got what I consider the most important information. And this all happened before AI. So literally, we printed 4,000 pages at the time of transcripts, and we reread them, and we highlighted what we considered important, and we built an outline based on a lot of yellow sticky notes.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't mean to say all. I meant the information. All would have been a lot. Too many books to contain it, would need to contain it. But, all right. And, yeah, I mean, I definitely recommend Think Remarkable. I read it. I think it's a great start for anyone starting. Doesn't need to be your entrepreneurial journey, but just really for everyone. So definitely check it out. And, Guy, like your AI asked me to ask you, is there any other questions you wish I asked you?
Well, to tell you the truth, the origin of that wisdom is from a New York Times reporter, and I interviewed her, and I said, so what, you got any secrets for me as a New York Times reporter about interviewing? And she said, what, one of the things I learned is you always ask at the end of the interview if you have not asked something you should have asked. And so, see, that's an example of where I never thought of that. I got that in an interview, and I put that in Kawasaki GPT. And now that it's in Kawasaki GPT, it's buried in a transcript, and it's buried in an episode. But Kawasaki GPT has brought that out to the front, and now you have heard that, and now you've used it. And I kind of, this is a very good use case, and I can say I rest my case that the system is working. So you caught all the questions that are necessary. I mean, just you could ask me, well, I'll give you a little joke. So, a lot of people ask, well, why did you write the book? And when you ask an author that, if the author is honest, the author will say, well, I got a big advance. That's the answer.
All right. And yeah, I mean, I hope more people make GPTs like this. Obviously, not a lot of people have access to so much data about themselves as you do, but I think it's a very awesome tool, and I hope we see more of those out there.
Yeah, I hope so too. I mean, I was thinking it would be great if Chat GPT and the big engines would cite individual GPTs, right? Because like if Chat GPT would answer a question and say, I got this from Kawasaki GPT, and you knew that Kawasaki GPT had a controlled data set because it's only Kawasaki and his transcripts from his podcast, I think that would make it much more credible than just making shit up. So to cite a particular LLM, I think would be very useful.
Yeah, I do too. I think that's great info, and all the AI that's being worked on nowadays, we have no idea where it could go. There's so many different ways that they could interact with each other, different LLMs working with each other, just like you described. We'll have to see what the future holds, really.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And listen, I just chatted a Canva link. Canva and I created an online course on how to be remarkable for people who don't have the book.
All right. Yeah. That's cool.
All righty.
Right.
Thank you, Andrew. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for having me.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for joining us, and thank you all for tuning in, too. We'll see you next time.
All the best. All right. Change the world. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.